It's not mine.
That
It's
stuff
the
is
Lord's.
good. Insert.
Oh yeah. Some of the stuff blows your mind.
Which I've already shared.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the last year's edition. I couldn't sell the new stuff in yet. So we do ours in October. So I'll be upgrading it to all the new stuff. New product reviews and new stats.
They probably won't be getting any better.
Nope. Now there is a growing awareness that there's a problem.
Yes.
Which is why Apple has now released its thing with the new iOS where you can track your screen time and it'll notify you if you've used it for too long.
Yeah.
So I don't have it yet, but I'm gonna get it and find out how much. It's cool because it lets you know how much you really use your phone.
Is that on the new Apple phone?
It's on iOS. I think it's going to be on the latest.
Is it
iOS.
12?
I think it's only on beta. Yes, 12.
Okay. Yeah, because I like.
I'm still back in the
Yeah, I'm still on iOS 11. Cause I think
That's
it's
when I'm 11.
in
Yeah.
Beta.
Yeah, it'll come out probably September, October-ish. That's when they usually release stuff.
Yes, so the app will come. I think it's a screen time. I'm not sure how they call it. Google's doing the same thing with the droids and their stuff. They've got their own version. I will tell you that. I will tell you that. Yes. So. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So hopefully everybody is recovered and feeling good. Because now we're going to come to what most people are looking for when they come to something like this, which is the specific things on how can I protect my family in these different areas. And so, let's see. I can't remember what the next slide is. Oh, we'll get to that one. Okay. Sorry, my computer's all the way over there, so I'm like, okay, I can remember what's happening with the notes. Okay, this is the protection section. And I have this little saying I use, which is if you're not paying for protection, you're not protected. You need to pay for protection. I had a guy, I was telling Stephen, I had a guy come up to me after one of these things, and he said, you had a great presentation. There's one thing I disagreed with, and that is if you're not paying for protection, you don't have it. And he's a technology guy, and he had his whole house connected and everything like that. But he didn't have a great solution for mobile devices because it's not just your home. It's your mobile devices. It's everywhere a kid can be with a device. You've got to make sure that whatever solution you've got incorporates all the different ways your family uses technology. Now, the information in this department can feel like drinking from a fire hose, which is why we do this. Because if you just go out and Google and search, you're going to feel overwhelmed because of all the different offerings and products and advice and suggestions that are out there. And so what I'm going to try to do is distill down some basic things that you can use and take home with, not make it complicated, but some basic things that you can take and put into practice when you go home. And if at any point you have a question, once again, please feel free to raise a hand. If you have a thought, please feel free to share that as well. I don't have a monopoly on information in this area for sure, and some things I would say may not be clear, so feel free to jump in at any point with a question or a thought. And the reason that this is true, if you're not paying protection, you don't have it, is because the kids have grown up with the devices and you and I haven't. We've already mentioned that. And so we are always going to be lagging behind. And that's unfortunate. That's why Prepare is so important, because there will always be a lag. There's going to be a lag with you and me in understanding and using the technology. We will forever be behind them. But then also, there's a lag for all of the companies who create the protection and the different softwares and apps that they use, because first comes the software that they're using, the apps that they're using, the stuff that they're using, and then the protections to come in behind that and try to figure out ways that we can monitor and control what kids are doing. And so there's always going to be a lag. We're always going to be behind. But the key is not to be too far behind. And so with that, let me go ahead and jump over here. Our kids are pretty smart with what they do. And so they're good at deleting history. And by the way, it's a lot easier than it used to be. Mm-hmm. When I wanted to delete my history, that was a lot of work, right? I'd go into the cache and dig up the cookies. But nowadays, they build that in for you. They've got privacy browsers and ways to hide what you're doing. They know how to cover their tracks. Your kids know how to find the loopholes. They will download an app to their phone in which they can hide other apps. Mm-hmm. So you're like, no Snapchat. They're like, okay, I'm going to download this thing called Music Manager. I'm going to hide Snapchat inside Music Manager. You know, they're creative. They use proxy websites to get around the firewalls that you put in. They're just good with that stuff. They're good at turning things on and off. They know things that you guys, that we would never think about. And so that's why we ultimately need to pay for some form of protection. Matthew 5:27 says this: "You've heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery,' but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And then, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell." Now, we always read this and we say, well, he's using hyperbole, he's exaggerating, and obviously to some degree he is, because we don't see a bunch of Christians walking around handless and eyeless. Praise God. But at the same time, he's also being very serious in that if there are things that are leading us to sin, leading our families to sin, we need to be willing to cut them out and get rid of them. And whether that's as dramatic as getting rid of the entire internet, doesn't have to go that far. Preventing them from using any devices, it doesn't have to go that far, but it can. If it becomes a situation, we need to be willing to cut it off and throw it away. And so you've got to have on your computer something that does two things. First of all, a filter. Some kind of filter. And I highly recommend that, because even as a 35-year-old adult, I filter my devices. Just don't need that temptation. Don't need to have that in my life. And your kids certainly don't need to have it in theirs. And if you pay for a robust filtering software, robust filtering app, then at least if they do get access and they do things online that you don't want them to do, at least they're going to have to work for it. Don't make it easy, right? We wouldn't. We don't want our teenagers to drink alcohol. We don't go buy the alcohol, set it on the dining room table, and say, "All right, kid, don't touch it. I'm going to leave it there as a temptation for you, but just stay away." We wouldn't do that with other things. So we should do that with the internet. And that's essentially what we're doing. We're loading a gun, we're putting it in their bedroom, and we're saying, whatever you do, don't shoot this thing. Whatever you do, don't drink this thing. But I'm going to leave it here just as a reminder of how tempting it can be. And so we don't want to do that with our internet either. We want to make sure that we are filtering every device that we have. The second thing is accountability. So in addition to having a filter, you need to have a way to monitor what your kids are doing with their devices. And usually these things come together. It's not like, oh, I got to go out and find this, I got to go out and find that. But you need to have both an internet filter and something that tracks and monitors the behavior online. Oh, but that's an invasion of their privacy. Listen, they can have privacy when they're paying all their own bills.
That's right.
Okay? When they move out the house, they get to have the right to privacy. As long as under your roof, they don't get a right to privacy. You know, and that's, by the way, it's not just a Christian thing. Like, I've heard police detectives at conferences say the same thing. We have to be willing to monitor what our kids are doing. Know what sites they visit online, know what they post on social media, know what they're texting, those kinds of things. Now, before you go out and try to buy something, somebody may already be using something, and that's great if it's working well for you. Some things you need to know. Most are reasonably priced and well worth it. You say, oh man, but this one is $60 a year. Right? Well, the device was how much? You can drop, $800 on an iPhone. And you're telling me you can't drop $50 on making sure that iPhone doesn't ruin your kid's life? Something's gone wrong. Okay? So they range in all kinds of price ranges, from $30 a year up to $150 a year. And it just matters which solution works best for you. So know in advance that there will be a cost, but it's well worth it. Also know this, and this trips up so many people. If you get a new software program, maybe it's Microsoft Word, maybe it is a design program, it's something new that you're going to have to learn, you typically don't open it up and start using it like an expert on your first go. It takes time to learn how to use this new thing that you have purchased. We expect that with other things that we buy, but for some reason we expect this to be easy. And it is. It's a lot easier than it used to be. The interfaces are very user-friendly, but it will still take time for you to integrate it into your life and to learn how it works. A big factor in this, so for instance, let's use the internet monitoring or the internet filtering capacity. These will filter out things you don't want filtered out. Awesome. That's okay. Most of them, the majority of them, will allow you to go in and manually enter a site that you want to allow. It's painful. Sometimes when your kids are using it for homework, they'll say, I need to look this up for homework and the filter's blocking it. Probably not just like that, but similarly. And it'll feel like this is really annoying. And it will be for the first few months. Until you work it, you customize it, you adjust it, you tweak it, you figure it out, where now you're not even thinking about it. And that's the way it's worked, and I've used several of these. I try to try out different options for our people and test them out and see how well they work. And usually it just takes some time of working with it and tweaking it and adjusting it to your family, and then it's much easier. You get the reports of what your kids have been watching, you get notifications if they do something they shouldn't do, and you're able to tweak and adjust the filter accordingly, and it doesn't really take up that much time. But just be ready for a learning curve. And don't give it up, and don't throw up your hands and say, well, this is just too much effort. It may be you're using the wrong one. And after you try for a month to get it to work right, you're still struggling, then do a different one. Try something else. But just be willing to take the time to invest, to learn the software, but also to adjust the software to the needs of your family. Also, regularly update and monitor it. It's not fix and forget. Well, I did that back in January and it's August. Haven't checked on it since then, but I'm sure it's okay. This is something that you will have to periodically update, check, look in on, just to make sure it's working okay and it's doing what you want. In general, when you're looking at phones and when it comes to phones, Androids are easier to monitor than iOS. In other words, Samsungs are going to be easier to monitor than Apples. And the reason is simply because of software. That's why the operating software on your Android phone is easier to drill down into than the iOS software on your Apple phone. Apple is just more, and if you know Apple, you know this, they are just more protective of their stuff than other companies are. And so it's much, if I was buying a smartphone for my kids, I would get them, even though I've got an Apple here, I would get them a Galaxy or something like that, because it's just easier. The things you can put on those phones are going to be able to monitor and control more than what you put on iOS for right now. Now, it's getting better, right? That some of the companies are making some progress at monitoring iOS. But even when you go and you look at product reviews of the various software and apps that are out there to help you monitor and protect your kids, they're all going to do more for your Android phone than they are for your Apple phone. So just bear that in mind. If your kids have Apple iPhones, it's not the end of the world. But if you haven't purchased anything for them yet, maybe consider going Galaxy instead of iPhone. What they will do when you get these things. Okay. When you get these things, here's what they'll do. You can set up different users. So every person in your family, or adults and kids, you can set up different users with different restrictions and with different settings. So if you as the parent need a little bit more freedom, you can have it. If you as the parent say, well, my 4th grader needs one setting, my 8th grader needs another setting, and my sophomore in high school needs another setting, you can do that. They'll each have their own login information, or you'll set it up on each of their devices so it's for them. It's very customizable. In the olden days, it was not so, but it is now that you get to set up all multiple users, and you can customize it for each person in the family. And what's really cool nowadays is, once again, you go back into the ancient times, you had to do a lot of work. You had to put in a lot of websites that you wanted to block. You had to select all the keywords you didn't want it to go to. You had to do all this hocus pocus to get it where it needs to be. Now it's really straightforward. They say, well, what is the maturity level of your user? Right? Young child, teenager, adult. Right? And so they make it really, which categories of things do you want to block? Sexuality, drugs, profanity, violence, worldwide terrorism, whatever issues are in your home, you can block those categories. It's very user-friendly once you figure out how it works. And so just be prepared for that. They'll filter internet content. They'll filter secure sites. You can schedule access. So there's certain times you want your kids to use the internet, certain times you don't want them to use it, certain times you want them to use some apps, certain times you don't want them to use some apps. You can set all that up. And depending on which one you get will give you how much control you have as far as scheduling apps and things like that, and scheduling usage on the computers. You can also monitor social networks. So some of them will give you a report of what your kids are doing online on their social networks, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, things like that. Other ones, most of them now will have remote management, so you never even have to look at your kid's device. Right? So on my device, I can go and I can get a status report for my kid's iPad. Or what most of them do now is you can put your kid's account on all the different devices they use, and then you just monitor your kid's account. And so they may have a laptop that they use, they may have a phone that they use, and they may have a tablet that they use. Well, all of them will come back to your device, and you'll be able to monitor and manage it remotely. So they do that as well. A newer feature that more of them are coming online with is geofencing. That's where you track your kid's location. So you're like, if they go outside of this area, I'm going to get a notification. They're trying to cross the county line. You will know. And so, hey, if they're going to have the device with them all the time, that's their fault. I'm going to know where they're at because I'm going to monitor their device's location. So that's cool. Also, you can block apps. A lot of them will monitor text messages, block contacts you don't want them communicating with, things like that. And it all depends on which ones you select and what the needs of your families are. So, with that said, here are some recommendations, and then I'll see if you have any questions. So, some of these I've checked out. Obviously, it takes a long time to figure out how much they work, how well they work, the ins and outs. Some of these I've checked out. Some of these I've just read the reviews on. I've talked to users about them and seen how well they worked. So with that said, here are the ones that usually rise to the top. Nanny, I've tried this one out. It's very straightforward. Does a great job. Stronger with computers than it is with mobile devices. So if your primary needs are computers, this is a good one. Nanny. So usually highly rated, worked well for me. So Nanny is a good one. Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes is probably my favorite for my stage in life. Covenant Eyes comes with a filter, but also monitors activity and sends a very basic, simple, straightforward report. They've also done a pretty good job with their mobile technology as well. So what you put on phones and things like that is going to work pretty decently. It's also Christian-based. So there's that. That's an added bonus as well. So actually met one of the guys that works at Covenant Eyes when I was on a mission trip in Arizona. So seemed like a nice guy. They've got a nice software package. So Covenant Eyes is great, especially men and ladies, for adults as well. I'm actually testing one out on my phone right now, so I don't have it, but Covenant Eyes is my default on my own phone because I don't want to be able to do whatever I do without having a set of eyes watching me. And so I love it. It works good. Highly recommended. Also, Norton Family Premier. I have mixed feelings about this one. It would be my first go-to. It does a lot, but it's got some drawbacks to it. But it usually is pretty highly rated. Norton Family Premier. Custodio. We've had some families using it. I've not personally tried this one out. I've tried out the top 3 there. But I've not tried out Custodio. But we have some families that use it and like it. And they're fond of it as well. And then we also have Circle with Disney. This is next on my tryout list. This is a different approach than the others. The others are software-based. You put the software on your computer, you put it on your phone, you put it on your tablet, you put it wherever you need to go. and then you remotely manage it. This you put on your home router. So it is the source. So everybody who connects through your Wi-Fi will go through the circle. So Disney's a sponsor. That's why it's Circle with Disney. I guess it just adds some legitimacy, right? I mean, if the mouse likes it, then clearly it's legit, right? So I'm not sure they sell it at Disney World, but yeah.
So if you have the circle with Disney, then they're unprotected if they're on somebody else's Wi-Fi.
Formerly, but they added Circle Go.
Okay.
And so actually, how it works is it's a router-based solution, which means everybody that connects to your Wi-Fi will go through the circle. You can set time limits, once again, user profiles, all that stuff. But it is router-based to anyone who connects at your home. But then also you can download those same settings onto the individual devices whenever they leave your Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Yep. Not originally, but now yes.
Okay.
And I've heard favorable reviews from our folks that have used it as well. And so I like this solution because it really does insulate your home from whatever might come in there. That way you don't even have to worry about a kid who gets another device in your home. So your kid's friend comes over, right? And spends the night at your home or something like that. And he doesn't have parents who care about this. But he connects to your Wi-Fi and all of a sudden he's like, why can't I access this stuff? Ha-ha! You are defeated. Right? So,
What if they're using their data?
well, then you're out of luck again. That's where you got it. That's the first section. Prepare. Right? So, when that friend comes over and shows you those things on their phone, this is how you respond, kid. So, yep, that's why it all comes back to that. It all comes back to that. But yeah, this is one I'm looking forward to trying out in the very near future. It's next on my list after those first three. Let's continue this. Screen bumpers. This is one actually produced by somebody at our church. This is a unique approach. I think it's great, especially if you're having issues wondering what your kids are doing online. It takes a screenshot every so often and then compiles it into a short video, just like that. So you actually get to see what your kids have been doing all day. It's pretty cool. So great, especially if you're wondering what's going on. As a parent, you can review it and look at it. It doesn't take too long. You just, all their activity, then boom, you watch the video in high speed, see what's happening. So screen bumpers, check it out. Also, I'm going to make some adjustments to your notes. I actually didn't realize it until after I sent Stephen the file, but phone sheriff is no longer an option. But I have several others that are teen safe. These are mobile-based ones. These focus more on the mobile side of things. So if you're really interested in locking down your kid's phone and knowing what they're doing with it, and text messaging and geofencing, some of the other ones will do those things, like Norton Family Premier, Custodio does some of those things, Covenant Eyes does, but these are really focused on the mobile side. Teen Safe, Bark, Guardian, all ones that have been favorably reviewed. I'm not as informed on these simply because my kids aren't sending any text messages for me to monitor at this point, other than emojis to grandma. So I haven't tried that. I'm going to eventually have my wife treat me like a teenager and monitor me and see how it goes. But those are ones that have been well reviewed and have been recommended nationally in news media outlets and things like that. It really, as you look at these different options, you say, what? Another one is RPACT. I didn't even have that one on there. So, RPACT. Yeah, I remember looking that one up. That was a good one. OURPACT. As you think about it, you got to figure out which one works best for your family. And I've given you a lot of things to look at. You can go, Google them, see what they offer, see what you need as a family, and implement them. And maybe the answer is more than one. It just depends on the need of your family. If you are a family with young children, right, you're probably going to be able to escape just fine with a net nanny. Something like that. If you are a family with multiple kids who have devices and who are on their devices all the time, and they're constantly communicating with friends, and they're very connected people, maybe you're going to want to look into a phone-specific solution, like a Bark or an Guardian or something like that. Maybe you want to do two. Maybe you say, well, we got Covenant Eyes that takes care of all this, but then I really wanted to drill down on the phones, and so we've got Bark on the phones. I don't know. It'll depend on what works best for your family. Maybe we do the circle with Disney. It covers everything that we need, and then we just talk about the rest. So it's going to depend on your family. It's going to depend on your history with your kids, how responsible that they are, how addicted to the devices they are, and things like that. So be aware of that. With that said, every single device, and this is what a lot of folks miss, but every device that has information coming in from the outside needs some kind of lock or some kind of eyes on it. And increasingly in our homes, that's a lot of devices. That might be your Blu-ray player, if you have a connected Blu-ray player. That might be your Roku, or your Apple TV, or your Amazon Fire, or your tablet, or your Kindle, or your Xbox. And if you're wondering, okay, how do we set up parental stuff and all that? It's actually really simple. Google it. Like, I could give you all the instructions on how to say set up your parental controls on DirecTV, because I've done that, or how to set up your parental controls on Roku or Sling or whatever you're using. But at the end of the day, Google it. Just say parental controls, Roku, parental controls, Xbox. And guess what? It'll tell you. Because they put those features on them to use, because they expect people to use them. And most devices now are going to come with some kind of parental controls. Now, that's not going to be enough for computers and tablets and phones, but your other connected devices, it will. It'll be very helpful. With a lot of these, a couple of the things with a lot of the mobile solutions, they're going to ask you to turn off the App Store. That's huge. Right? With a lot of your other devices as well, just preventing their ability to add new things to the devices is huge. And so every single device you have, whether it's DirecTV or Dish or Xbox or PlayStation, whatever's in your home, just make sure you have looked at the parental controls and you've set them with a password that's not stinking obvious, right? Like your child's name. The password for Matt's Xbox is Matt. They will probably try to break it at some point. So just make sure, something they would not remember or figure out. They'll make them go all hacker on you and then have success. So a couple things with that. 5 commandments. I'll add some to this, but these are 5 things to keep in mind. If you're not paying for protection, you don't have it. So get something for your devices that you're using and monitoring. You must have an active content filter and monitor regularly maintained. So just have that stuff going. Make sure you're looking at the reports so you know what's going on in your kid's online life. Know what every app does and disable the App Store. A lot of parents say, well, I just don't know what those apps do. Well, there's a really easy way to find out. Okay, first of all, what you do is you disable the App Store. If you don't know how to do that, you just go into settings this is on the iPhone. General restrictions. Boom, restrictions. You set that up, you know the password to it, they don't know the password to it, and in restrictions, you can just flip that App Store off. What does that mean? What was that?
You can turn off a lot of stuff.
You can turn off a lot of stuff, right? But if you turn off the App Store, you don't have to worry about the rest of it, because you'll know what everything on their phone does. And so every time they want to download an app, who has to download the app for them? You do, and you're like, I don't know what this Musical.ly app is all about. Well, once again, I'm not breaking any ground here when I tell you there's a simple way to find out. It's called Google. Google it, and everything will come up, and you'll be able to find it out. It's not any more complicated than that. And then if you're still not sure, download it and you check it out. And you're like, okay, let's see what this app does. That way you know what you're putting on their phone. And you're like, Tinder, should I put this on there? No, you should not. Okay? And I say this because if I gave you today a list of apps not to put on your kid's phone, first of all, it would be subjective. But second of all, it would be obsolete in an hour. You know, and then you're thinking, oh, I've got this all covered. I've got every app on this 400-page document blocked, and then all of a sudden, here's one that I hadn't thought about. But this is a simple way for you to know what your kids are involved in. There's a lot of good, harmless, fun stuff that's out there, but just be aware. Another thing, and this is, they're working on workarounds to this. I don't know how much success they're having yet, but any app that opens its own independent browser, which means if I click on the link in the app and it opens a browser within the app, is potentially an unfiltered internet gateway. That not only do I not monitor, but also I don't filter. So through certain apps, an easy way to figure that out is just open the app, find a link in the app, hit the link, and if it takes you to your browser, no worries. But if it takes you to a browser within the app, then it's potentially, not necessarily, but potentially a source of unfiltered internet access. So just bear that in mind. Like I said, this stuff does lag behind. Yes?
Would turning off your data for that app stop that from happening?
It will.
Assuming you're not connected.
Yes, but a lot of apps do require the data to function. But yes, it should. I say should because this stuff is always changing, but yes, it should. If you turn off data for that app. Good point. So be aware of that. What else on apps? I think it's a real key, it's a real basic thing that you can do. Every connected device needs eyes and locks. And then follow your kids on social media and know their passwords. It's a great way to just know what's going on in your kid's life. And yes, they can create a shadow account. But it's hard to keep those hidden for too long if you're active on there as well. If they're on Instagram, you should be on Instagram. If they're on Twitter, you should be on Twitter. If they're on Snapchat, well, it's debatable, but I won't make any value judgments on that one right now. You can ask me that afterwards. But you just want to make sure that you know and that you have an idea of what's going on. So you can log in as them. See what they've been doing. Oh yeah, log in as them. Look at those direct messages they've been sending. You know? I mean, there are kids who've sent out direct messages about intentions to commit suicide. You know? And the only way to catch some of those is to be able to do that. So, you know, will this feel a little bit burdensome to your kids? Yeah, it will. They'll get over it. It's better than the alternative. And once you build this, they're growing pains with this. It is difficult at first, especially if you haven't been doing it. If your kid is 14, you've not been doing this, it is a jolt to the system. If they're 4, you're ahead of the curve. If they're 14, they're going to buck against it, especially if they've had unfiltered use. And so maybe step by step begin implementing these things. Maybe don't come out of this and be like, all right, we're clamping down. But step by step, implement this, kind of ease them into the shallow end, down the stairs. Don't just push them off into the deep end, that kind of thing. Ease them into this. But ease yourself into it. It's hard to just go and do all this in one go. Say, okay, here's our goal for right now. We want to limit access to technology in the home. Here's our goal for right now. I just want to get a filtering and monitoring software on our devices and then figure out how that works. And then we'll worry about the rest. But start working and building this stuff in. And then once it becomes the culture of your home, it's just going to be second nature. You don't even have to think about it as much. But it does take time to develop. Any questions about the protection stuff? About things you can do as a parent to protect and guard your kids and your family and possibly, I would recommend even yourself. I don't know that anybody needs to just have free reign with technology. So I recommend that to our men as well. Have that in your life. And it's really convenient because I'm getting this for the kids, but secretly for myself as well.
I have a story to share.
Do it!
So, y'all know I teach middle school. So, one of my kids at school, I don't know if it was this year or last year, was Facebook Living in my classroom. He was supposed to be reading a book. He had his phone behind his book. Anyway, So I guess he was not very smart and forgot that his friends with his dad on Facebook. So I get called to the office like during class, and I'm like, oh gosh, what's going on? I walk in and the man's like to the kid, give me your phone. And the kid's eyes were like, oh, what did I do? He was like, why are you Facebooking live in this lady's classroom? He was too stupid. Well, that's not nice to say, but he forgot that he was friends with his dad on Facebook, and his dad was watching it, like, as it was going on. So then he had to, like, make a video of himself apologizing and Facebook Live that. So, yes, I would say follow your kids on social media. Be their friend so that you can see what's going on, because even certain situations like that, which was not, I mean, he wasn't videoing anything bad. Nothing bad was going on. He was just videoing like people in the classroom while he was supposed to be reading a book. But
Teacher wasn't paying attention.
I wasn't. Honestly, you watch the video, I wasn't paying attention. I was doing my own thing. But yes, I totally didn't have a clue he had his phone out and was.
No, it's a good innocent example of
I thought it was
what he could
hilarious
do.
though,
Yeah.
that his dad was like, "Give me your phone. Why are you Facebook Live this lady's class?"
Yeah, you can pull out your contract and say, see, you don't get to Facebook Live from a classroom. Give me your phone.
And to add on to that, I try to follow our students on their social media accounts if they let me. Okay? I've
You
been
need to let
at,
their parents know if they don't.
yeah.
That's true.
And that's just because I may as well know what's going on in their life and stuff. But I've been at a school function in school hours and have had one on Instagram Live. So it happens. They're on their phones, even at a school function during school hours.
Yes. And
Make
that's,
me serious.
kids post stuff all the time on Instagram. I'm like, you really forgot
Yeah.
that I followed you, don't you? Yeah. I followed you because you followed me first, so it's your own fault.
Right.
That does remind me of one other thing, and this is important to point out because it applies to video games and applies to social media and applies to a lot of apps. A lot of technology now has moved to a social culture where anybody and everybody can connect with anybody and everybody. Any app, any game where any stranger can come in and show a video or request a video or send a message or talk with your kid is something you need to think about. Especially an issue with video games, especially an issue with certain apps. Popular apps like Musical.ly as an example. But basically you got to ask yourself a question. Would I want to send my kid into a room full of strangers that I did not know and have them wander around and interact with them in any way the stranger felt led to do?
Mm.
It's so different than you dropping them off at Kroger and saying, go meet some new people, I'll be back in 2 hours. It's
Yes.
more of a public place.
Yeah.
It's more of a private, I mean, what would you do if somebody walked up to your kid and started talking to them? Be freaked out.
Yeah. And the internet is much more sketchy than Kroger, more like a Piggly Wiggly or something. I love Piggly Wiggly, I'm just kidding.
I have one.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the game Roblox?
No.
Not at all.
Mm-mm.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
There was a lady on, some, I don't know, news feed or something that was claiming that her child's avatar was sexually assaulted. And I just don't know how to, I mean, I've seen how Roblox works because my little girl likes to play it. And I just don't see how that can happen.
Yeah.
It was, somebody was a hacker that had went in there and manipulated the gaming process, and they said they supposedly got that fixed.
Here's the catch, and you know, specific apps, it can vary. But with any of this stuff, use YouTube as an example. Okay, YouTube came under fire recently because their kids' YouTube that has all this supposedly stuff that kids can watch. People had gone in there and created animated cartoons using well-known kids' characters doing violent sexual things.
Mm-hmm.
So you think your kid is watching Paw Patrol, But all of a sudden, the Paw Patrol got a little bit violent and somebody lost a head or was sexually interacted with. Basically, these people just come in, they create this stuff, they put it in there, and then parents were discovering their kids were crying or traumatized because this video, using characters they had been familiar with, showed them doing these terrible things. And so, all that to say, it comes back to being prepared, because you never know what you're going to encounter. Something that's relatively safe and fine might, through a hacker or something that somebody creates, be not safe and fine. And so there's this, you just always have to be prepared for that. A game that seems completely harmless and doesn't cause any problems could all of a sudden do that. I remember where there was Clash of Clans or something, create a stir. There was kids who were being bullied through Clash of Clans. You know, their friends were excluding them or picking on them in the game that they were playing with their friends, connected to each other. So anything that you use, even things that are relatively safe and benign, can potentially not be for a random reason. And so we have to keep that in mind. Does that mean that you don't use any technology? Well, no. You know, you just got to be wise. And you have to prepare your kids. Hey, if you encounter, you see, you experience this, let's talk about it. So that they're prepared, they know how to process it. It's always been true. Things that have been safe, I mean, goodness knows. I mean, just in the area of sexual abuse with children, it mostly happens with safe people. It's mostly family members, close friends of the family. Things that we look at you as safe often can be some of the things that surprise us. So, all that to say, that's always a possibility with anything we do with technology. But does that mean we throw it out? No. I mean, in the same way we didn't throw out magazines because you have to decide to publish Playboy. We just say, okay, we do the best we can to be as wise as possible in the things that we choose to do, and then we prepare ourselves for when they encounter things that they would rather not. So,
This is just a thing too. Remember, games or video games, apps that are connected to the internet, there's usually chats that they can be on. And Xbox Live, PlayStation, internet, they're able to talk to his friends, or they can be talking to anybody in the game. And there's even more access. There's access there to your child as well.
yep.
And that's like the game that you're talking about. There's chat in there,
But you can turn all that off.
friend requests, and I got all that turned off because some of that stuff is horrible.
Yeah, and that's where the Google comes back in, because if you Google, a lot of times people have already posted that stuff online, and you'll be able to go in as a parent and make those adjustments. Because with a lot of games and apps, there are ways to go in and make adjustments and set things up so that your kids can use it more safely.
She can monitor our daughter's phone,
Mm-hmm.
every activity.
Yep.
I have Bark.
You have Bark? Okay, good. Yeah, awesome.
It sends me a report every month. with
Has it
all
been
the-
relatively easy to use?
Yeah.
Good.
Doesn't have any trouble with it.
Awesome. Excellent.
Hey, so a flip phone, we fall under the shelter.
But
Yeah. No, it's parents always ask the same.
I've just turned it off.
Yeah, people always ask the question, when's the right time for a smartphone? When's the right time for certain apps or social media?
But all this stuff you talking about,
Yeah.
man, why would you want to hand a child this
I
phone?
mean, that's a headache. Send him
Yeah.
out the door, tell him iPad, and go outside and play.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, I just don't,
yeah.
like to me, we're playing with, are we sheltering them or are we training them? I think we're doing a little bit of both. But like my son, I don't know that if I asked him today, do you want a smartphone? No. Some of them, I mean, they're just consumed. But to
Yeah.
me, if I've got to worry about it, do all this dang monitoring, I don't need to have it.
The only issue with that though is like at school, because now most of the stuff they do is on the iPad, and they're not gonna be ready for that technology.
No, girl, they click it like this right here.
They get it through school.
Hard to
hard
man,
to
but
get
that
through
is
school, they
inbred
get
in
it.
them.
The
That is
difference,
inbred in them.
when you
They
think
will
about the
figure that
difference
technology
between
out.
sheltering and training, and every family has to answer that question for
Yeah.
themselves, and when is appropriate. For a lot of our families, you know, and this has been true anywhere I've been, you know, the pressure the kids are definitely outside, right? I mean, without the device, they're just not part of the culture in their school. They're not part of the culture in their church. They're not part of the culture. You know, I know even in our high school ministry, as it currently exists, for them not to have a smartphone, they would be outside the culture of the high school ministry. And so for a lot of families, it is, man, if our kid doesn't have this, they really are a pariah in a sense of being outside and being disconnected. And so for some families, the decision is, okay, we want to give them this. We want to give them the opportunity to interact with and be connected to their world. But at the same time, we don't want to give them that without any strings attached. And two, with the training aspect, it's kind of the old, once they graduate from high school, will they then know how to interact and live with that world? Because if, okay, well, their life didn't blow up from 0 to 18, but then their life totally disintegrated at 19 when they had full access to the devices that they haven't figured out how to use responsibly. And so that's just a way to say, not that a family should give their kid a smartphone. Because I will never tell a family, oh yeah, give your kid a smartphone, or oh yeah, give your kid social media. I would never say that, because their kid may not be ready. It's a decision each family has to make for themselves in how do I most effectively disciple, because at the end of the day, that's our goal, disciple my kids to be healthy followers of Christ, not in the ideal world I wish existed, but ultimately in the world that does exist. And so for a lot of families, that means they're going to have a flip phone for a very long time. For others, that means we are going to give them a smartphone, and then we're going to train them and help them to steward that and use it wisely in preparation for that period when they're going to have to do it in college. Because you can blow up your life just as easily at 22 as you can at 16. And so as parents, my goal, at least with my kids, will be to train them. Now, when they'll get a smartphone, I don't know. Right now, I'm like, 17 sounds good. But it may be 14. You know, it may be, I can't predict that. I'm not going to try to, and I would never dream of telling a family when that is for their kid. But that's something you got to decide is, at which point do I give that? You know, and that's
something. Just saying at the beginning, it's an addiction machine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and to me, they need to be reading the Bible. We don't need to be over there on that. And two, if they have a friend on Facebook, are they gonna have to? And if that friend posts something inappropriate, I don't know of a lot of teenagers that's gonna have the guts to befriend that person or go to that person. And it's just too tempting. Like what I would tell my children. Sometimes saying nothing at all is better, and you got instant access to them through that phone or through that internet, and you say something, you can't take it back. Or you act stupid in a way, like a lot of them do on it. You know, and you can't, sometimes you need to sit back and you need to think. You don't need to sail off and it's right there at them. And they're, like you said, they're 48 years old and they don't know how to handle it.
Yep. And that's where our role as parents really comes in, to be able to train them in this area. You know, because there is the option of, well, they're just not going to have any technology whatsoever. And if, you know, they're not connected to what their friends are doing, who cares? As long as they get out of my house, you know, as long as they get out of my house pure and innocent, then I've won. But ultimately we want, and that's not saying that's what you're doing, but that's the attitude I see with a lot of folks, only to discover it didn't work out that way. And I've known families that have kept the kids off the devices. We don't have them in our house. We don't do that. And guess what? The kids blew up their lives just the same. And so all of that to say, in whatever you decide to do, whether it's flip phone or smartphone, whether it's we're going to have video games, we're not going to have video games, we're going to watch TV as a family, we're going to read Pilgrim's Progress as a family. Whatever you decide to do, make sure it's intentional, with the goal to develop disciples who can be lifelong followers of Jesus in their world in the area of technology. And that's going to look a little different for everybody. So, and we've got kids who use flip phones. We absolutely do. And cheaper.
Pretty rough children.
Yeah. And cheaper too. You know, so I'm not, as long as you're being intentional and your goal is disciples who can follow Jesus in this area, You know, that's ultimately what you want to think through, and then also think through the possible consequences. Because even parents I know who have said, well, we're just doing flip phones. I'm like, so what about television? What, we need parent locks on DirecTV? You know, it really is a comprehensive thing. It really is. So with that said, let's take 5-minute break. All right, let's take a quick 5-minute break, bathroom, and then the last point, the last section is much shorter, but I think it's the most important part.